You said before that this whole world is all just a dream you're having, right? But if you're in your own dream, how can you be so completely positive that what's happening is only a dream? And if what you're experiencing in the dream is so realistic to you, how can you even tell what's actually the real world?
Dreams can be a frightful thing, can't they? Able to project images and scenarios so vivid that when you're awake, you could swear that they were reality. But that's just it. We eventually wake up. We come to the understanding that what we witnessed was just our imaginations. But what if you couldn't wake up? What if those dreams were to take hold of you, making you question the things that you were dead set on knowing were dreams, and then them making you think that they are in fact reality? You'll be lulled into an everlasting sleep, where the notes of dreams battle against the melodies of reality, clashing together to fully compose an eternal sonata. When I was originally writing this video, I had many different ideas in mind, and ultimately, none of them were inspiring me to finally make this video. Things like extensive research into the life and death of Frédéric Chopin, looks into the fields of philosophy and the works of Plato and Descartes and all the others alike. And while this all sounded intriguing and challenging to make, in the end, I started to hate working on this project. This is a big video for me. Not only am I going to be reviewing one of my favorite video games ever made, but now I'm going to be fully examining it to my fullest extent, and adding things that were honestly unnecessary was draining me of making this. But I think I finally found a way to not only dive into this game that I love so much, but also pick apart what truly makes it so special to me. I'm going to separate this video into 4 parts, and each part is going to be focused on an element of the game that makes it stand out to me. And just so you know, there are going to be spoilers throughout this entire video, as I'm going to be talking about major points across this game's story. And seeing as most of what makes this title very unique are found towards the end of the game, I want to make sure you know what you're going to be getting into. I'll also talk about gameplay and all that other good stuff, but this will be taking a different approach than how I normally do things here. There's a lot to take out of this little package, and I don't want to hinder here any longer. Let's get this little project kicked off. This is an in-depth look at one of my favorite video games of all time. This is Eternal Sonata. I think an important note to make about Eternal Sonata is that its story and setting are purely based in a fantasy world, meaning there's monsters and other such evil creatures that roam throughout the land, which you'll be battling as you make your way through the story. Locations are much more whimsical and colorful and elemental. I mean, look, there's areas that are just giant ice structures and menacing musical towers, alright? Fantasy is just the game's subgenre, and honestly, it embraces it, but there's another side to the world building of Eternal Sonata, and that is reality. The story of this game takes place within the mind and dreams of a man that goes by the name of Frédéric Chopin. For any of you who have studied music or have taken a music course in college, that name probably rings a bell, for Chopin was an actual composer who lived in our world. He was a famous Romantic era composer whose piano pieces are claimed by some to be the greatest musical pieces ever composed for the instrument. Notice that I said was, because yeah, he passed away a really long time ago. And like I mentioned before, everything that takes place within this game happens within the musician's mind. And more importantly, it happens in the moments of his death. What's basically told to us is that while Chopin is lying on what is basically his deathbed, he is having dreams within his slumber. These dreams are the story that is taking place throughout the game, which Chopin himself actually takes a part in. In this fantasy world, which I don't think ever truly gets a name, we meet a medicine-selling girl who goes by the name of Polka, who is sadly also living what could be her last few moments of life. She suffers from an illness that isn't fully explained, but basically she has the power to use magic. This magic can stem from healing abilities, which could heal most wounds, to offensive abilities to thwart any monsters that stand in her way, which sounds awesome, right? Yeah, well, there's a side effect. Apparently all those who can use magic are said that they are not long for this world, but even worse is that due to a false rumor that is spreaded around by people, they think it's contagious, so they refuse to even go near her. So now, not only does she constantly have death overlooking her shoulder, but now she also has to deal with people who dare not even go near her. Yeah, this game doesn't exactly start on a happy note, but shifting sides for a moment, we have our other main male protagonist, Allegretto, an orphan boy, I assume, who follows the trope of the Robin Hood character, stealing from others to give to the poor. Through conversation between him and his partner Beat, we learn that the ruler of this country, King Waltz, has raised the tax on almost every single everyday essential item aside from one particular medicine, and that is called mineral powder. So Allegretto steals what he deems necessary to give to those who need it. He decides to go on a journey with his partner to visit the king so that he could discuss the high taxes on essentials that everybody needs, which leads back to Polka and our third important character, Mr. Chopin himself, or as he mainly goes by in this game, Frederick. And this is where, for the most part anyways, the main story shifts. Now, for the most part, the plot follows your typical JRPG story. Main characters meet up with each other and decide to all go see Count Waltz together to talk about all the crazy taxes. But as we go through our little adventure, we learn from a party member named Viola that mineral powder, that one thing that isn't taxed, basically turns people into mindless magic-using soldiers, which the king is basically using to build an army to fight a resistance group that is against his ruling. All that boils down to generic RPG group going up against the evil king. But while this world story is what we'll be playing through and experiencing on this journey, I would say that the story is a red herring in a certain way. I'll go into this a little bit more in the final section of the video, but what I'm referring to is Frederick himself. In the game story, he's the one whom Polka meets and is inspired to start a journey as we mentioned above. But Frederick sees this adventure as something else. Only a dream. One which, whatever happens, is simply due to his own mind. And if anything were to go wrong for either him or anyone else, he could simply reawaken and start all over again if he chooses. He even tries to prove this by reading Polka's mind, since he is the one who created everything he sees. However, he's proven wrong. His answer was different from what Polka was thinking, and while this is the first part in a spiral which only continues downward, this is important to remember before we reach the final section. If what you're experiencing in the dream is so realistic to you, how can you even tell what is actually the real world? A phrase once spoken would begin to shatter the dreams of reality within Frederick and this world. I feel like it's no surprise to say that music is a key component to what makes Eternal Sonata so special to me. I mean, the main character of the game is a famous musical composer, and this is a JRPG, so it's probably no surprise to hear the words, "This game's soundtrack is simply beautiful." The composer is Motoi Sakuraba, whose past works include the Star Ocean and the Tales Up series, and fun fact, also Mario Tennis. I can't put my head around that either. And as per usual, he knocked it out of the park with this game. Eternal Sonata's tracks are filled with beautiful sounding wind instruments, accompanied by those melodic sounding strings that I'm sure every JRPG player has grown accustomed to over the past couple of years. But its main instrument of choice is, of course, the piano. I mean, the game's main character is a famed pianist, so it fits. And I think the instruments being used to compose this soundtrack aren't a mistake or just random happenstance either. If anything, thematically speaking, it makes sense. This game's world is supposed to be the creation of Frederick's mind, and every instrument present in the game's scores are all those that Frederick is well versed in, or at least knows about. Although for some reason you can also unlock this score piece that's just a rock and roll style guitar solo, so yeah, okay, maybe not everything had to be accurate. And while the soundtrack is amazing in its own right, when you really sit back and listen to it, either on your own or when you're playing throughout the game's story, there's a form of storytelling that seems to be taking place alongside the game's plot. Now, of course, the composer would try to have the OST fit alongside any moment in the game that it would be heard in. That's common in almost any game ever. What I'm trying to get across though is that the music is also part of the storytelling itself. For instance, there's a song that goes by the name Proxy into the Heart, and not only is it one of the best pieces of music that I've ever heard, like, period, it's commonly known as the main theme of Eternal Sonata. I mean, if you fire up the soundtrack, whether it be on YouTube or the actual audio CD itself, it's the first thing you hear, and all throughout the game you'll hear bits and pieces of this song. Sometimes it's a music box version, sometimes it's only a certain section, but it's repeated throughout the story, and it's normally played when major plot elements are taking place. And during one of the final moments of the game, this theme is heard once again, but this time it's the full track, and it plays during one of the most climactic moments of the story. Really, it kind of ties everything together, and in ways the whole soundtrack kind of works like this. The opening sections of the game feature some nice calming or relaxing tracks which can convey the easiness that most characters are feeling. After all, this game basically just starts out as an adventure to visit the king and ask him a few questions. But as the plot unravels and events keep spiraling in different directions, the set pieces and music change to reflect those situations. It makes sure that each moment is being accompanied by the appropriate track, which, and I know this is going to be stretching it, is very true to the composer that this game is basing itself off of. It's said that some of Chopin's compositions were created with him living throughout all the constant craziness that was surrounding him. Things like war and separation from family and illnesses. And using other things too, things that were surrounding him like family or locations, he would put it all into the music he was making in some form. Now this is just purely based on what I've read online and what I've learned in classes, but I like to think that any musician can relate to that in some way. Heck, maybe even Frederick is the one who's composing the world's music as he experiences this world in his dreams. Is that going too far? That actually might be going too far. One last bit that I would like to talk about the music is how this game incorporates the real-life music of Chopin. These are performed by, and I'm going to butcher this, Stanislav Bunyan, who was asked to come in and record some famous piano pieces for the game, and these are played during these interludes which depict Chopin's life up until his untimely death. The real Chopin, that is. Which is just a reminder to the player of, hey, remember, this guy was real. Like, he actually lived in our world. It's also nice that the game just tries its best to teach us who Chopin was, because I'm pretty sure that a lot of people who are playing this game probably didn't know him or that he was a classic composer from the Romantic era of music. Look, at the end of the day, I have no real idea about music theory or understanding how a song is composed. This is all just based off how I'm hearing the soundtrack play out. TLDR, it's like my favorite video game soundtrack ever, or at the very least it's in its top 3. It boils down to not only having great music tracks, but also how the music flows with the game's narrative and locations that make it have a special place in my heart. And Proxy into the Heart, it's just a beautiful song, like, oh my gosh. I highly recommend that you listen to it, even if you don't plan on playing the game or you haven't played the game before. It's really good. Like, I cannot stress enough how good that track is. Alright, I'm done geeking out about the music. Let's move on. Eternal Sonata's combat is often something that is generally liked by those who've played it, myself included. When quickly glancing at it, it seems like your typical action JRPG. Characters are able to move across the battle map, you can hit enemies multiple times using your basic attack strings, and if you want to end a combo in a flashy manner or just feel like dealing some extra major damage, each character comes equipped with their own special arts. Now this seems like something you would find in something like, let's say, Star Ocean or the Tales of games, and you wouldn't be that far off. I mean, the studio behind this helped in many of the Star Ocean games, as well as anything basically Tri-Ace has touched, so seeing some influences isn't all that surprising. However, this game brings 3 defining factors which I think help separate it from the rest. Let's talk about the first one, that being light and dark. On almost every single map, you will have areas of the map that are filled with light, and other areas which are shrouded in shadows. What these areas do is change which one of your special arts you'll be using in battle. See, each character has a light attack and a dark attack to be used in the aforementioned battle areas, and some characters have stronger light attacks and some have stronger dark attacks. This gives the player a factor to choose when moving across the battlefield. Do you move to try to strike down the enemy but risk doing so because maybe the area they're in makes you less stronger, or do you try to lure them towards you so you can use your stronger abilities but you don't get any movement? Seems like the answer is pretty easy, but enemies also have differences within the light and shadow areas, this being their forms. Some enemies have different forms that they will take depending on which affected area they're in, and more often than not, there's other forms, a stronger monster, which can lead to a problem for you and your party. A simple thing like changing the element of the field can lead to a multitude of issues, and that just brings some problems for the user to fix. Now that the map and field effects are out of the way, let's delve into the meat of the section, and that being the combat system itself. As I mentioned before, this game is an action RPG, meaning you move across the battlefield and swing your weapon as much as you want, with the time that you have. That's right, this game only has a certain amount of time to perform each of the actions that you want to do. To the left of the screen is the time gauge, which shows you how much time remains in your current character's turn. And the minute you start to move, that time starts to count down, meaning every step and every action you take costs more and more of your precious time. Of course, the enemies also follow the same rules, so there is some fun to be had with this little system. Outside of being timed, the actions you're allowed to take is all like you've seen before: attacking, using an item, moving across the field, and using special attacks on your foes. In a way, it's kind of like the ATB system, but instead the ATB is counting down to the amount of stuff that you can do. Something that this game also brings to the table is echoes. What are echoes? I am so glad you asked. Basically, when you hit an opponent, you will build up a combo counter. Now, in the beginning of the game, all this serves as a counter for the amount of hits that you've done to the enemy. But when you unlock echoes, this is where combos start to become more interesting. After you pass a certain amount of hits on the opponent, the game will reward you with an echo. The higher the combo, the more echoes you receive. What these initially do is give additional power to your character's special attack. So a base special attacks could do an upwards of, let's say, 2,000 damage, but if you have max echoes built up, that attack can go to like 20,000 under the right circumstances, and that's just in the beginning of the game. And echoes carry over to other party members' turns, so you could theoretically use one character to build all the echoes you need, and then, when you switch to your next member, you can lash out and deal a massively strong special attack for a huge amount of damage. And something that goes into the thought process of all this is the party level system. As you progress through the game, you will gain different party levels. What they do is change battle conditions for the better, but also for the worst. These change things like tactical time being reduced to even the battle timer decreasing in its total amount. But this unlocks some good things as well. Things like being able to equip multiple specials and the ability to change said specials after reaching a certain amount of echoes. In my eyes, these two things make the gameplay and party building aspects much more interesting. When you start the game, you may pick the heaviest hitters as you have the most time to work with, and the echoes don't really affect your damage output too much. But the further you get in the game, this can change as you won't have a ton of time to work in battle. So you could switch it up to have one major damage dealer and have the other two focus on healing and echo building so that your one trump card can deal the most damage. And Eternal Sonata's cast definitely lets you play around with it. Some are meant for big damage, some are the middle ground, and some can't do much, but they can support your allies or deal massive combo chains. It's all very interesting, and I'm sure after you reach the halfway point, you'll probably have your party that fits you just right. But like realistically, as long as you have Viola in your party, you're pretty much set because she could basically kill everything in the damn game in like 2 turns. Yeah, finding good character strats can honestly make this game a breeze to play through. Honestly, this game can be way too much fun to play during certain moments, especially when we unlock things like counters and broken items like Hell Mustard. But here's where I have some gripes with the game, more specifically the PS3 version. Now, in a lot of ways, the PS3 version is superior to the Xbox 360 version. Harder difficulties, extra characters and dungeons, more story elements, and even cute little costume changes. But all these good things don't make up for possibly the weirdest decision game design-wise, and that is the random encounter system. You see, in the 360 version, every enemy that you would encounter on the field has a specific layout and number of enemies that you would encounter when entering a fight with them, meaning no matter what, even if you restart the game, that particular enemy will always have the same battle layout. The same goes for the character position as well. However, in the PS3 version, every time you enter a fight, placement of both characters and enemies are randomized. Now, I don't believe the number of enemies are randomized. I actually haven't done enough playthroughs of this game to find that out, but having enemies placed anywhere within the battlefield is kind of annoying. And one last gripe I have in terms of combat stuff is hit stun and how the enemy can just lock you into never being able to block their attacks. So basically, the enemy will get a free shot at you if you don't happen to be facing their direction, which is completely fair. However, sometimes that could put you in a loop with certain attacks, which makes any of their moves unblockable, and if you aren't prepared for it, that's a TOD and there's nothing you can do about it. But this doesn't happen too often, and there are low chances of it ever could happening, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. All in all, the combat is really fun. I mean, that's what basically everyone was talking about when this game first came out, and I think it honestly deserves it. Its combat is way too much fun, and it's fun to play around with. It definitely tries to separate itself from JRPGs at the time, and honestly, I think it works out for the best. Throughout the video, I've spoken about many things, but among those few things, there has been one major focal point which, without these elements and themes, wouldn't exist, and that is Frederick himself. I mean, the world is created within his own dreams, and not to mention the game also takes place in the moments of his death. To say he's the most important character in the game would be an understatement, but within the story itself, he plays a very minimal role. I mean, he's there, and he brings his own ideas and theories to the party, but in terms of actually involving himself within the world, it's almost non-existent, which is for reasons that he constantly mentions throughout the whole game. This world is simply one that he's created within his sleeping thoughts. A selfish king, a war being brought on by a corrupted king, characters who've died in this world, it's all imaginary to him. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, there's even a moment where he states that if things were to go terribly wrong, he would just wake up and it would all be over, and he could just redo it if he wanted to and set the balance of things. And he keeps this mentality throughout a majority of the game, though the further we go in, the further Chopin begins to challenge his perspective. He begins to start worrying and caring about those who surround him. Those who he once just gave a second thought to as being part of his dream start to feel real to him. And even as you play the game, you start noticing that the more the story develops, the more Frederick gives his thoughts on the events that are taking place. Where in the beginning, he kind of just follows the flow of the rest of the party. But this doesn't mean he still doesn't hold the fact that this world is just a dream. He even admits that even though he's growing attached to this world, he still believes that this is all within his own mind. I mentioned at the beginning of this video that the story is like a red herring, a thing shown to the player to misdirect and warp our sense of understanding. We know that Chopin was a real person, so whatever adventure we're playing through, we know is all make-believe. But the story tries its best to try to convince you otherwise, and for Chopin, the world and characters are doing that for him. The deeper he goes, the deeper his false reality starts to take a hold of him, and no more is he aware of the situation than at the end of the adventure. Now from here on out, most of what I'm going to be talking about is purely conjecture on my own part. This is how I tend to interpret the flow of the game's ending, which starts with our party meeting a fortune teller. This old woman exclaims that she is excited to see Polka once more. Yeah, even though this is the first time Polka has ever met this woman. She tells Polka to draw a fortune, saying that it would be one of bad luck, and when she does, she tells her that if the fortune is indeed bad luck, then she should tie it to the sacred tree found behind them. Another thing mentioned is that she says only Polka is the one who can pull a fortune from this place. As Polka does what she is requested to do, the fortune teller has a look of surprise on her face when she notices that Frederick is also with the group. She gestures him to go with Polka as she reads her fortune, hinting that their destinies may be intertwined. When arriving at the tree, they notice all the bad luck fortunes that have been previously tied up, but when Polka opens up her fortune, she is greeted with a blank piece of paper. And this is what basically kind of opens up the ending. On the main story side, we are finally going up against Count Waltz because, I don't know, we're like stopping a war or something. Honestly, he just becomes kind of a dick at this point. Like, he just gets so much power to a point where he just wants to destroy everything. And after we beat him, the man just fucking rips a hole in space and time to run away, and we go chase after him. This basically leads to a land of the souls type deal, where we can meet the souls of those who died while using the mineral powder, which turned them into mindless soldiers, alongside anything else. We power through the final dungeons and we reach the final boss, Count Waltz and his demon dragon butler. Yeah, honestly, this fight is... okay, well, for the most part, it's pretty difficult. Waltz can be kind of a jerk, but once you take care of him, the fight basically becomes pretty easy. Heck, I even did it with only like 2 surviving members because I'm dumb at blocking, so yeah, it's actually not that bad. But after we defeat and we move on to the final cutscene of the game, which bears a striking resemblance to the introduction of the game, a destroyed and warped version of the Fields of Flowers found in the first location of the game, Tenuto, where Polka and Frederick first met and their journey began. And so it shall almost end. Frederick stands up against the party, claiming that now is the time that he truly stands to the test. This world is nothing but a dream, a fabrication that he created, and he seems to prove it right here and now. Our real final battle begins, the creations versus the creator. And when we win the battle, and as Frederick seems to draw his final breath, the world remains the same. It doesn't disappear. They're still stuck in this awful place. And it's here where Polka's ending also comes into light. Driven by a sickness that will only end her life sooner than others, she believes to be the last ripple in this broken world. And the only way to clear the raging waters of reality is for her to take her plunge and calm them down. As she says her final goodbyes, she lifts her feet and falls into the abyss. And the crazy thing is, this isn't the first time we've been through this. The audience are treated to this scene right at the beginning of the game, almost verbatim, with some change in script which will make sense in a few moments. After taking her leap, the others remain silent, Allegretto furiously angry at the one who caused all this sadness, the one who said that this was all a dream. Why couldn't he save her? If this was truly a dream, then why did she have to die? And thus Frederick wakes up. He comes to realize that it wasn't his death that he had to overcome in his personal journey, but the acceptance of that which surround him. And this is where the fan theories start to come into mind. This journey, everything leading up to this point, has been Chopin's journey of acceptance, that soon his life would be coming to an end. And the closer he gets to that reality, the closer it begins to hit. And this is no clearer than with Polka as well. I haven't mentioned this before, but Polka very much resembles Chopin's real-life sister, who sadly also passed away at the age of 14. It's said that Chopin had loved her very much, and her death affected him greatly. He even states the similarities between the two in one scene. And I do believe this is why Polka is also on the verge of dying, as Frederick would never know anything about his sister past the age of 14, so when she inevitably passes away, so too would the image of Chopin's sister. And this is where Frederick turns back time to repeat everything over again in order to save her. This is where those multiple bad fortune signs come in, and other small clues that lay hidden within this game's story start to come into place. The journey we are on isn't the first journey to take place, it's not even the second or the third. Polka and Chopin, as they are the most affected by this dream, are stuck in a perpetual time loop due to the unwillingness to let go of Polka's death. Another theory I have is that the journey we take part in is one that Chopin himself finally joins. What I mean is that before, he was just an observer of the world around him, and whenever the tragic ending would happen, he would just reset his dream back to where it began. But on our journey, he finally joins the adventure. It's even mentioned when they visit the fortune teller that she has seen Polka many times, but she's never actually met Chopin, showing that this time he's finally willing to come to resolve this loop. When the game comes to an end, so does Chopin's life. When Frederick finally accepts the fact that he will no longer be a part of this world, he uses his power to bring Polka back. It's not fair for her to have to die just because he can't let go. With his final moments of life, he brings Polka back, just so that she can live a happy life like his sister couldn't. He brings peace to the world, and therefore also brings peace to himself. At 2 a.m., Chopin had passed away. When the game comes to an end, so does Chopin's life. And while we are left with a happily ever after screen for the characters in the dream world, we never really know what happens to them after. If they were a part of the dream, then they would all just disappear. But if they were to do so, at least it would finally end on a happy note. I kind of like the fact that we don't really see what happens after. The game kind of keeps us guessing whether or not what we experienced was false or reality. There's a lot that someone can unpack here. And that's part of the beauty of this game, trying to figure out what exactly is going on within this little story, what things represent or what meanings lie between the lines. It's all very interesting to see unravel, and I remember it bringing up some tasty GameFAQ threads way back in the day. The beautiful part about this game's plot is the story that it's not directly telling, but leaving clues along the way and waiting to see what you piece together by the end. And chances are, by the time you've completed your puzzle, it would look a lot more different than mine. Well, we have finally reached the end of the video. So, Eternal Sonata. Yeah, it sure is a special game, alright. And it's one that I hold very close to my heart. To say it's different from a lot of the games that I've not only covered here on the channel, but also played in my spare time is no exaggeration. Its plot is funky, its premise is baffling, and all in all, it just seems like a basic JRPG. But to me, it's much more than that. It's about a character's personal journey about the acceptance of death, and also gets very philosophical at times when talking about the understanding between the differences of reality or fantasy, or how characters throughout the entire story constantly state things like, no one can control the actions we take, what we do is our choice, in a world that is formed by a dream and is played by us. There is a lot in this game, and yet it's not even that long. A casual playthrough will only take about 20 to 30 hours depending on how much grinding the player does, and the PS3 version adds even more additional scenes and content not found in the original 360 version. With extra dungeons that are to be tackled after the endgame with a bonus boss fight, there's a lot of things to do. In truth though, it's hard for me to recommend this game to a lot of people. Some would probably find the combat too slow or janky, some would probably find the story just too outrageous, and honestly, if all the music puns were to turn you away, I would completely understand. But to me, everything this game does just hits in a positive way. I really wish I could put into words just how much this game impacted me the first time I played it. Its story is told so differently than a lot of games I've played over the years, and it's something that's so much fun to go back to and create new theories on. About a year ago, I played through this game with a close friend of mine, and by the end of our playthrough, I remember just how much he was taken back by some of the philosophy that this game tried to convey, and we spent a good hour just discussing a ton of stuff about the plot or the ending or anything in between, and that's why I love this game. It's just so much fun to talk about, and the music is just so good. Every single track is a joy to listen to. I can't freak out about it enough. I really love this game. I really do. It's something that I will continue to recommend to anyone who's looking for a new JRPG experience to try out. And you can find it for really good prices as well. Highest I've ever seen this game go for is about $30 for the PS3 version, and that's outrageous, trust me. If you find it out in the wild or online, I personally think it's worth every penny you'll spend. And yeah, that's been one of my reviews of one of my favorite games of all time. This was to celebrate the fact that I hit 500 subscribers. And yeah, it's pretty late, I know. And last time I checked, we're almost at 600, which is insane, and I really wanted to get this video out sooner. But I went through so many revisions of this script that it took me a while to find something that I was proud of. And honestly, I kind of just hit a rut in video making. And let me tell you, this whole quarantine shit didn't help. But hey, I'm back, and I'll continue to make stuff that I hope you'll enjoy. The next video is also a big one. Not as big as this one, but big enough, and I can't wait to bring it to you. And I really want to thank every single person that watches the stuff I make. I do this because you make me proud to do it, you make me happy to do it, and you make me want to do it. I thank you all for getting me to this milestone. It's one that I genuinely thought I'd never hit, and here's to many more. My name's Matt. I hope you enjoyed the video, and guys and gals, just have yourself a damn good day.